There's a spirit that defines every Tasmanian. Fight, gravel rash grit, devil-like determination. It's time to unleash this spirit on the great game. Without our boots on hallowed grounds, the AFL will never be complete, nor will we.
Hello and welcome to the Believers, Tasmania's AFL journey as we push for 19th licences in the men's and women's competition of the AFL. And in doing so, we celebrate the greats of Tasmanian football who've contributed so much to our storied history. Today, one of the greatest players ever to pull on a St Kilda jumper, a former captain, 6-time Trevor Barker medalist, a 5-time All-Australian. He's pretty much done everything, including being a master chef. His name is Nick Riewoldt. Great to have your company on the Believers, Nick.
Thanks, Al. Thanks for getting the master chef tag in there. Finally got some silverware, which was nice.
Now, Riewoldt or Revolt? Can you clear that up for me?
Jack keeps disagreeing with me, but I spoke to my grandparents and it's a soft V, so Revolt.
Revolt, okay. Now, do you know much about the origins, the family history?
I do, actually. When I finished playing, I wrote a book and wasn't really that keen on going down the path of writing a stereotypical football biography, kicks, marks and handball. So I really tapped into sort of where I've come from, family history. And so I went and spoke to my grandparents on Dad's side to learn about their journey from being teenagers in during World War II through Berlin, and then emigrating to Australia in the 50s. And, yeah, so I'm across a lot of the history. It's pretty harrowing, but obviously now, a couple of generations later, they reside in Tassie. They've got grandchildren all over the country and are really proud of the fact that they've got a couple of boys that have and did run around in the AFL.
Did they come to love footy? Did they get to know it quickly?
They love it, yeah. So 4 boys. So Dad the oldest.
Yep.
And then Ray, Chris, Jack's dad, and Peter. So all 4 boys played in the TFL. I'm told Dad was a really good clubman, and the other boys are all really good players. So at one stage, I think all 4 of the boys were playing for Clarence in the TFL back when the TFL was a really strong competition. So
yeah, absolutely.
A really rich sort of footy history, albeit in a really short space of time within our family.
You said the history of your grandparents' experience was harrowing. What were some of the aspects that made it?
I mean, I think being a young person growing up in Berlin throughout that period during World War II, a lot of stories which you hear and you almost can't believe. And then when I tried to relay some of those stories in my book, there are so many sensitivities around it. Like clearly, the propaganda machine was in overdrive during that time, and I guess the Germans, throughout that period were almost viewed as villains for a lot of the atrocities that went on. But within that, there were people just living normal lives until they weren't. And their city and their country was thrown into absolute chaos. And, a lot of those stories that my grandparents have relayed to me were of just kids trying to survive. Incredible to have learnt that history within our family and to sort of realise that we are just pretty lucky to be sitting here.
So how did your grandparents end up in Tassie, of all places?
Yeah, so my grandfather Heinz came out to work on the hydro scheme in the 50s, yeah. So wow. Dad was born over in Berlin and was a young boy when he came out, and then the rest of the boys were born in Hobart.
And you grew up in Sandy Bay, is that right?
Grew up in Sandy Bay, yep. So played for the mighty Sandy Bay Seagulls, which actually wore North Melbourne coloured jumpers.
Yep.
And my eldest boy James has just started under 8s this year, and he plays for Brighton Beach, and they're the Brighton Beach Kangaroos. So they wear North Melbourne jumpers as well. So we've come full circle. Yeah. So grew up in Sandy Bay, went to school at Princess Street Primary School.
Did you?
And have just so many great memories. I just view my time growing up in Tassie so fondly.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to chatting to you about Orford and all the things that you do there. I know it's a very special place For you, does Brighton Beach have a hedge at the end of the ground that kids can climb in like
It doesn't.
When you were a youngster at Coimbra?
It doesn't. And I do remember when the old boys started playing games, the Hutchins old boys started playing games at Coimbra because they played at Memorial Oval there, the little oval at the school at Hutchins. And I've got great memories of that and going to the footy with Dad. Dad would go up into the social club with all his mates and I'd be running around with a few. We'd just go.
Yeah.
And it was back in a time when you could just go and
freedom.
Parents didn't really worry about anything bad happening to you, I assume. And I remember just for the entirety of the football game, we'd be up the back of the old Memorial Oval there or the old rowing cage that they had, and when it would get really cold, a thin layer of ice would form over the top of the water, and we'd break big shards of the water off and smash them over our heads like they were glasses. With Alex Thompson and Tom Gibson, a couple of my really good mates growing up, we'd all go to those games together. And then when they eventually moved up to Coimbra and the massive big hedge, I'll never forget one day, Alex Thompson's sister Elle, she went missing, and it got pretty serious. Like she'd been missing for hours, and I think the police might have even been called because she just was nowhere to be found at the game of footy. And then, casual as anything, a couple of hours later, she just strolls out of the hedge where she'd been just playing and hiding and climbing up and down through the hedge for just hours, to the point that there was a full manhunt on for a missing child report, all of this sort of stuff. So anytime anyone mentions the hedge, which is famous, my mind immediately goes back to this day at Coimbra Oval.
Oh, the hedges at York Park had a famous hedge as well. Yeah, Coimbra hedge. My wife used to play in that. She lived not far from there. So many fantastic stories, and the freedoms that you had as a kid growing up in Tasmania made it really special, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And it's almost something now that when we mentioned Orford before. When we go to Orford, that's one of the few places now I really feel like I can provide my kids what I had in my childhood, where they get on their bikes in the morning and head off with mates. And I don't have anywhere near the same level of concern for their safety as I do if I'm here or anywhere else in the world for that matter. It's just that almost caught in a bit of a time warp, which is something pretty difficult to recreate.
You want that for your kids, don't you? You're reluctant to give it to them too much if you're growing up in a big city. But if you're in Tasmania, it is that opportunity to open the door and go, get on your bike and go for your life. I want you to come back with cuts and bruises.
Yeah,
and
it's real. It's all the real stuff that we had in our generation that is becoming more and more difficult to provide for your kids because of all of the other distractions out there. So when we go down there, we get back, we don't have Wi-Fi in the house. We don't have internet. We don't have subscription TV, or we don't have Foxtel. We don't have anything like that because we just want it to be a pure experience for them, where they're on their bikes, they're playing footy, they're playing cricket, they're fishing, they're swimming, all of the things that are just real.
Yeah, really pure, really natural. A few crays get caught down there, do they?
Yep. Not as many by me as I would like. I'm not as good a fisherman as some of my cousins and my mates, but I just love it. Like that ability to actually and to share with your kids as well and share with your mates. I really took it for granted, having grown up with it. And then when you bring people down that are from the mainland or from overseas or whatever, and you head out on a boat, you get in the water, you pull some crays out. It's almost like you look at your mates and they're almost sort of awestruck that this actually exists in Australia, because it is quite unique to Tassie, I feel. And then you bring whatever you catch back, whether it's crays or abs or fish or whatever, clean them on the end of the jetty, cook them up within an hour or two. That full sort of ocean to plate experience it's pretty special. It really is. And I mean, I certainly take it for granted outside of the times that I'm given those reminders of just how unique and how special it is.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk obviously a lot about the Tassie licence bid and how a Tassie team could work and your passion for it. But that argument that sometimes gets lodged around retention, I find it extraordinary that people think that Tasmania isn't appealing, wouldn't have appeal for a young person.
Yeah, well, that's been part of my brief on the task force is the brief around retention. And clearly there's a huge element within that centres around culture, the ability to provide an environment for players to thrive in their footballing lives. But outside of that, you spend a lot of time just living as a person too. And when what is on offer in Tasmania is not on offer anywhere else where there's an AFL club. And for every kid that wants to play in Melbourne at the MCG and in the big bright lights and the big city life, there are people like Jeremy Cameron who chose Geelong because of the lifestyle, like Patrick Dangerfield who chose Geelong because he loves fishing and the lifestyle. There are a lot of those people out there as well. So the retention argument for me is one that never had any validity, because the ability to create an incredible life, as well as playing in a footballing state, in a footballing crazy state, it's a pretty amazing opportunity for anyone that can see the value in that, which is real and which is tangible. And I know the culture and the way with which players will be embraced by a Tasmanian team is going to be something to behold, and then something that I will be, as a retired player, incredibly jealous of. Because I can already get a feel and a sense for how special it will be to be a part of. So, the lifestyle part of the retention conversation is just not even a relevant one anymore, because I know and and we've lived just how incredible it is down there.
Yeah, I look at cricket too as an example. When you see guys like Ed Cowan go down there, not getting as much opportunity with New South Wales as he would have liked, Tasmania helps him become a test player. It's happened with Jackson Bird as well, for example, and their links to Tasmania are so strong, and I think that would certainly be the case with the AFL as well. You would have been too young to represent Tassie, wouldn't you, as a footballer?
Yeah, I was.
You moved to Queensland?
Yeah, so I went to Queensland, and that really perpetuated the misconception that I was a Queenslander. I've always been a Tasmanian. I just happened to play the majority of my junior footy in Queensland, and it was a little bit. It was a little bit difficult lining up against the Tasmanian boys in the under-16 carnival or the under-18 carnival. But it was probably, in retrospect, the opportunity that sort of put me, I guess, on the recruiters' minds initially, because I didn't make the Queensland under-18 team as a bottom age player. I missed out on getting picked, and then a week before the carnival, Robbie Copeland who ended up at the Brisbane Lions Premiership player, he went down with an ankle injury, and so I was a last-minute pick to come into the team, and the first game of the carnival was against Tassie, and Tassie had the gun centre-half forward, Danny Roach, that was going to be a top 10 pick and was a top 10 pick, and I got the job on Danny Roach and as a last-minute inclusion in the team and played pretty well in that game, and that was sort of the moment really where all of a sudden the possibility of an AFL life for me became or at least started that journey of becoming a reality.
So it was literally a moment there where you thought, I'm playing at this level now and I feel like perhaps there's a pathway for me that wasn't there before?
Well, that was it. That's before prior to that, I didn't believe that I was at the level, and then all of a sudden you play on someone that everyone's saying is going to be a top 10 pick in the draft. You're thinking, oh my gosh, this is impossible. What am I going to do? I shouldn't even be in the team. I'm a ring in. And you play well, and so that confidence starts to build. But for me, I look back, and that was one of the big moments.
Yeah, that's a great story.
Ironically, against Tassie.
Against Tasmania.
Yeah,
and were you aware of the power of the Tassie jumper?
Yeah, I was, because as a kid growing up, I was at North Hobart Oval the day that
1990, you were there in the crowd, one of the 18 and many thousand more who crammed in.
There must have been 40,000 there, because every Tasmanian you meet says they were there. But I was there. Ironically, years later, my coach Ross Lyon was playing for the Vics that day, and so I was absolutely aware, and having had uncles that represented the state. Chris was the game's record holder in the TFL until Scott Wade broke his record. So I was absolutely aware of the power of football in Tasmania. I can still remember, I'm not sure whether it was Saturday or Sunday mornings, waking up and then watching the footy on the ABC, watching the game of the round in the TFL on telly, and Chris would be playing at KG5 or playing up in Launceston against the North Launceston against the Bombers, or Devonport against the Blues, or Burnie against the Hawks. I remember those days vividly and still romanticise those days as a kid watching football, because they were the heroes that I could see and I could touch. It wasn't necessarily the AFL players, but the TFL was so revered back then that they were our heroes.
Did you have any favourites aside from
Gavin Cooney,
yeah,
Darren Winter?
Whoa.
Yeah, they were probably the ones.
Darren Winter, the nicest bloke you would ever chat to off the field, had the most extreme case of white line fever, didn't he? He was feared in the
unbelievable.
competition.
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember those and look back on those times really fondly. And as a kid that, I grew up playing for Sandy Bay, but obviously the affinity with Dad and his brothers and clearly Chris went for Clarence.
So Jack's family parks itself on the eastern shore, but you guys moved to the western shore and then you moved to Queensland. So how did the move come about? Why did the family relocate?
Oh, just for a change, really. And it was great. I mean, I absolutely loved my time in Queensland and on the Gold Coast. It was, it is a really good place to grow up. But sort of always at our core, we've, really, sort of tightly valued and held onto those Tassie bonds. And then once I was drafted, the proximity and the accessibility became so much easier again. So started to just spend more and more time, heading south rather than heading north.
Did you take a few of your Saints teammates at times as well?
I did, yeah, absolutely. For probably 3 or 4 years there, all of the first year players would have an induction camp, and it was at our place in Orford on the East Coast. So we'd come down on a Friday after training, and we'd have up to sort of 20 people, and we'd all shack up at my place or at my cousin Alex's place across the road, and everyone would sort of contribute and give whoever a call to say, hey, are you up for the weekend? Can we borrow your tinny or can we do whatever? And we'd head up to the pub on the Friday night, have a steak, a Woodies. We'd go up to the Spring Bay Hotel typically and have the famous Woody steak up there and a few beers, and then up early Saturday morning and full day on the water, fishing, diving. Actually, the diving got kiboshed after the first year because a couple of the boys didn't handle it too well, and I think the coach was maybe a little bit worried about, I don't know, the boys getting bent or...
We can name names here, Nick.
Well, actually, this is before the Saints boys came down, but famously Brendan Goddard talked a big game. The first time I took a few of the senior boys down, this is, sort of mid, around the time that we were starting to perform really well. So probably mid-2000s, 2005, 6, something like that. And Brendan Goddard, Max Hudgton, and Cozzy came down and Andrew McQualter came down for one weekend, and BJ, as he does, he talked up a massive game. There'll be no craze left in the ocean. I'm going to get that many. And it's amazing what happens the first time you put your head in the water with all the scuba gear on. And he shit himself. He absolutely panicked. He couldn't force himself to go down. He hung off the back of the boat on the duck board for about 15 minutes just trying to work up the courage to head down. But to his credit, he finally got under the water. And I was down underneath below surface with Cozzy as well at one stage. And the one thing we'd spoken to the boys about is, when you come back up to the surface, if anything, goes wrong or whatever, just come up slowly. We don't want you to burst a lung or anything like that. So I'm with Cozzy and sort of holding his hand because he's not a great swimmer, Cozzy, and so we're underneath and get onto this sort of hole, and there's a cray in there and working away at it and get it out. And I hand it to Cozzy to put in his catch bag, but he lost all composure and he shot to the surface as fast as he possibly could. And I thought, well, that's it. We lost this man.
Just lost the number 2 draft pick.
Lost the soldier. But he was just so excited, to be under the water and see a crayfish and couldn't believe it. But no, great times taking the Saints boys down. And later in my career, when we'd have the induction camps down there, it was a really special moment to be able to create a bond with the young players. And Tony Brown, the development manager down at St Kilda, would always get a canvas done up of photos of the trip, and I've got them all hanging up on the wall down there. So every time I go down, I've got I've got one with Jade Gresham. His first memories or moments, I guess, at St Kilda were spent down at the shack at Orford, and obviously now he's gone on to great things. So, yeah, they're nice little sort of webs back into the footy club.
Speaking of relationships and special relationships, you've got a pretty special one with your first junior footy coach, who was also your father, wasn't he, coaching you at Sandy Bay?
He was. And
that continued right into your playing days, didn't it, when you would literally either as you were driving to get the bus to the ground or to the airport, have a phone call, or on the bus every game.
Every game I spoke to Dad before the game, and sometimes it was as simple as just ringing and saying good day so that we kept the tradition alive. A lot of the time he'd want to, so who's playing? I'm like, oh, Dad, I can't do this right now, because I was always wound up before a game. Or he'd try to start telling me some sort of unrelated story, which I had no time for because I was just in such a ridiculously focused headspace, which I wish I wasn't wired that way. But yeah, his dad was my first coach at Sandy Bay, which is great to reflect on now that, as I mentioned, I've got a young boy playing footy and I'm assistant coach. I'm not the senior coach, I'm assistant coach, but it's great. Like I've got a really vivid memory of everyone spending time on the bench, obviously, because it's all about giving everyone a go. And I'll never forget, Dad brought me off in the last quarter. I started the last quarter on the bench in one game, and this just sticks out. I must have been 7 or 8. It sticks out. And we're playing at Parliament Street Park, and he forgot halfway through the quarter to put me back on, because you were meant to only spend half the quarter off. And so I sat there for the entire last quarter, and I was so mad with him, so pissed off, that I went down the end of Parliament Street. I got on the massive big slide. I don't even know if it's still there.
I think it might have been decommissioned for a while and rebuilt not so long ago.
It's probably not even that big a slide, but in my mind, this thing is like a Wet n Wild, super slide.
It's a good slide.
Yeah, and so I slid down the bottom, and I spent the entire rest of the game and afterwards down the bottom sulking because Dad, the coach, was harder on me than he was on anyone else, and I'll just never forget that moment.
I can imagine how angry you would have been at the time. But
furious.
Modern Nick Riewoldt would have – there's no way you would have quietly sat there. No, you would have been straight up and said, hey, put me back on the ground.
Well, I didn't quietly sit there. I cracked it and I slid down the slide and didn't come back. So it was a proper tantrum, absolutely.
You said you wish you weren't wired the way you were. So was there a period where you sort of started to realise who you were and the way you thought and the way you ticked and the way that maybe rubbed off on other people as well?
Yeah. Honestly, it's probably not until I finished because I just couldn't manufacture it any other way. I mean, I was the way I was, and I think that contributed to helping me be the player that I was. Maybe if I tried the laissez-faire approach, I wouldn't have been the same player. So it's now just in retrospect that I look back and think that there might have been more opportunities for enjoyment on the way through, but that might have compromised performance. Yep. So I am who I am. I was what I was. The game was great to me. I just wish at moments I could have smelt the roses a little bit more, but there's not too much about the experience that I would change.
Yeah. Was that always who you were as a young kid?
I think so. Yeah. I think I always had that sort of level of performance anxiety that would just take me to a place of focus, and it was almost an unrelenting focus. I think people had a real misconception about me as a person, because of the public-facing version of myself was always the footy version, in which I was captain for 11 out of my 17 years. I was ultra serious, ultra competitive. Basically walked around with a scowl on my face for 17 years. But for anyone that knew me, in sort of quieter moments or my private life or my life since, that's not necessarily who I am. I'm a pretty tactile person, which surprises a lot of people. I'm a notorious personal space invader. I love hugging people, and that probably surprises a few people. And but that's what I've loved about finishing the game. There are absolutely elements that I miss, but I don't miss the person that I was in those moments and how wound up I was all the time.
How severe is performance anxiety for a professional athlete who's in the headspace you were?
Yeah, pretty full on. I didn't enjoy the build up to games at all, not at all. It was something to endure, not enjoy. Once the ball was bounced and we were in the throes of competition, I loved it. I just loved it. The feeling of being able to dictate the outcome of a game, because that's how I felt going into every game. I felt that I can win or lose us every game, which was, in a team of 18 players is not necessarily real, but that's
a bit of truth to it.
Yeah, well, that's just how I felt. But it was a burden at times as well, because every time I went out to play, I felt that pressure of, okay, this 2 hours will either enhance your reputation or it will diminish it, which is crazy to think that after, say, 12 years in the competition, one game is going to change the way people think about you. But that's how I thought about every game from my first right through until my last game that I actually knew was going to be my last game. I was in the shower before my last game and I was going through my pre-game routine and just in this intense headspace, and my wife Catherine came in and she said, would you just relax? Like, just enjoy today. It's your last game. You know it's your last game. You can't make finals. You've announced your retirement. This is it. I said, I can't. I just can't relax. I can't enjoy this. I can't enjoy this part, because I still think that if I don't go out and play well, even though it's my last game, people will think differently of me, which is dumb, right? It's nonsensical, but that's just the headspace I found myself in.
But when would it start? So in the lead up to a game, when would you start to feel the anxiety?
Probably after the last training session. So
Which would be 2 days out?
Maybe 2 days out. Yeah, and so just then I would start to develop a bit of a pit in my stomach that I knew what was coming. And so for the next 2 days it was about doing everything right to give yourself the best chance to play well, from a physical preparation, mental preparation. It was a pretty intense 48 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did it make you hard to be around?
Oh, impossible.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's the one thing that I look back on, and when I say I wish I wasn't the way I was, that's the thing, because it impacted relationships, it impacted friendships, it impacted my family. I was hard to be around. Yeah, really hard to be around.
You must look at what Catherine endured during that period and
horrible.
Be so grateful.
Horrible. Catherine, my parents.
She had to put up with a bit.
My brother and sister, they'd come down for games and, everyone walked on eggshells. Absolutely, which is, I just think about it, and that's the part where I'm like, couldn't you have just lightened up a little bit to make life easier on everyone else? But like I said, I just couldn't manufacture it. It was just.
Did you try and see anyone at any point? I mean, sports psychologists, all that kind of stuff are pretty prominent in the game now. Did you ever go down that path?
A little bit, but for me, it was about choosing the hard path, and that was a hard thing to go through, but it yielded results.
Yep.
For me. So the easy path would have been to try and push the care factor to the side, because that's the only thing that I think would have made dealing with that build-up easier, was if you just removed a bit of, it's all right, it's just a game.
Yep.
Remove the care factor and you probably won't invest as much. So for me, no, it was something that I was prepared to do to be able to reap the benefits at the other end.
Jack and you sort of publicly have had sort of quite different people's perceptions of you as individuals are quite different. He's more jovial and laid back and probably doesn't care as much. It's probably not even close to the truth, is it? I mean, you clearly weren't like that at all as an individual. That's the way that people viewed you.
Yeah.
And then Jack comes across and perhaps it's a little laissez-faire in the eyes of some. Come game day, we see that absolute competitive animal. But is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, he approaches it differently, and that's great. I mean, I had real life examples in front of my eyes in my teammates, and probably the guy I played the most footy with out of anyone, Lee Montagna, was the exact opposite of me, and it used to drive me crazy. He used to drive me crazy, And I used to drive him crazy, and he knew it, and he knew how to push my buttons. So in the warm up, when I wanted everything to be perfect, like I'd go out and I'd do my crazy, warm up 2.5 hours before the game, which just became a monster in my own mind. But there was also a bit of gamesmanship in that. I wanted the opposition to see me and know that I was ready and what they were in for. But Lee Montagna would deliberately, when we were in our proper warm up, out on the ground as a team, he would deliberately miss me with his kicks, just to push my buttons. Like he'd joke with the assistant coaches, watch this, I'm going to put this one over Rui's head, I'm going to put this one along the ground. He would just do it to piss me off. Which he only...
Did it work?
Yeah. Even like he'd do things like start singing the opposition theme song in the warm up. And I'd say, mate, you're a leader. Stop doing that. What are you doing? Like, oh, relax, mate. And I was just like, I couldn't see the funny side of it while I was in the throes of competition. But it's different strokes for different folks. Everyone does it their own way, and one's not right and one's not wrong, and you can be successful doing either. I was the way I was.
At what point in your career, so you drafted in 2000 as the number one pick, but you talk about you wanted them to see you. You knew what you brought. You knew your capacity to influence games, to win games. When did that come? Do you remember when you first started to feel like you were one of the most dominant players in the competition?
Well, my second year. So my first year I only played 6 games because I hurt my knee in the pre-season and then had three surgeries. Had most of my medial cartilage removed. So sort of that compromised me a lot later in my career. That surgery, and I still sort of have issues with it now. I've had my knee drained for sort of 3 or 4 years consecutively later in my career. But it was probably my second year where I started to tap into when Grant Thomas was appointed as coach, and he really helped me with this. Started to tap into the affirmation side of mental preparation and putting out there something that hadn't necessarily happened yet, but something that I wanted to be known for. So I would do my second year, and I've still got the notebook, and I would write pages and pages and pages of pretty much just the same thing. Nick Riewoldt is the hardest working forward in the game, and I wasn't, but I was trying to manifest it, and so I would just write that just time after time after time, repetition, and then the actions that would underpin that. So work hard up and across the ground. When the ball is bounced, run a 400. Get your opponent up the ground and then beat them back towards goal. All of the little actions that would just become triggers within the game that would help underpin me becoming the hardest working forward in the game. And so just, gradually there was a game against Sydney, I think it was round 5, 2002, when I played centre-half back, played behind the ball, and we had a draw with Sydney that game, and no one thought we could win the game, but I played really well, and that was probably the first moment where I thought, some of this stuff that I'm doing is actually working. Even though I was playing centre-half back and I was talking about being the hardest working forward in the game, some of the stuff I was actually talking about was starting to work, and so that just fueled the desire to keep doing it even more and more and more, and that just became a staple for me throughout the rest of my career, that every game I would pretty much write the same things, write the same actions, and even before training, so that by the time the game rolled around, I'd already made the decision that this is who I am, this is what I'm going to do. I've trained it religiously, and so game day just would happen.
There.
Yeah. I'd already prepared for the moments before they arrived,
and then you just handle them because you know what to do. Was the plan always that you were going to go forward? You were at centre half back, you were saying, but you were writing down these ideas of being a key forward.
I started forward in my first year. I was recruited as a forward, and then my second year, Tomo played me behind the ball to learn of some of the great forwards. And I played on Wayne Carey in a practice game at the start of my second year, in his last game in a North Melbourne jumper at Moorabbin. It was a practice game. Played on, the Rockers and Ben Graham and David Schwartz and, these sort of guys in that year as a centre half back. And then really late in the year went forward and kicked a few goals, and then from 2003 onwards, that was it. I was a centre half forward, but I had some great mentors. So the last game of Stewie Lowe's career, I played at full forward and kicked a few goals, and then Lowe retired, and it was almost sort of a bit of the passing of the baton, a little bit, I guess. But I think there was a method to Tomo's madness throughout that period.
You arrive at a club that had been in a grand final in 1997 and then experienced a fairly sharp decline, and pick one and pick two of yourself and Justin Kazitsky and guys like Luke Ball and Nick Dal Santo and those types of players are added in the next few years as well. And you start to climb. So 2003, you go to centre half forward. 4 and 5, you really start to build, don't you? Does it feel like you're on a pretty exciting path then?
Oh, it was best. So two periods. So 2003, 4, 5, and then 2000 and last half of 2008, and then 9 and 10 are the two great periods that I experienced throughout my career, and they were different. 3, 4, 5, football was different then. Football was fun. Football was really good fun, and we had a coach that made it fun, and at the same time was all about developing not just great footballers but great people. So Tomo was a revolutionary. He started community camps. That was not a thing before Grant Thomas came in and took us down to Warrnambool one summer, and we did a two-week training camp in Warrnambool. Then they became a staple of the AFL. He took us to London at the end of 2003 on a training camp. We trained with Lord Sebastian Coe, Daley Thompson. We trained at Eton College. We ran laps. We ran laps up and down a grass strip in front of Windsor Castle. Like we did stuff then that as a young, 18, 19, 20-year-old footballer, you think like, okay, well, we're on a training camp. Now you look back and you think how unbelievable were those experiences, and how much fun was football back then. It was just incredible. So yeah, we had something really special throughout that period. So when you look back and then you think, well, Tomo coached the Saints to the first coach since Alan Jeans to take us to 3 consecutive final series in 4, 5 and 6. You think how unfairly was he dealt with? That was pretty ridiculous. But out of that, I guess, Tomo had gotten the group from a mental preparation point of view and a team ethos point of view to a point where Ross Lyon came in and, we had a down year in 2007, but then bounced again really quickly and got as close as we did to achieving the ultimate. And I feel like throughout that period, I just look back on it so fondly. Clearly, the only thing missing is the rubber stamp.
Mm. Well, you love Ross, don't you? Absolutely love Ross, and he as well has a sort of an interesting perception publicly at times, doesn't he? But what do you see in him, and how does that sort of contrast with perhaps the public view of Ross Lyon?
What I see in Ross is the most amazing ability to challenge people incredibly strongly without ever souring them up. So it's a pretty unique skill.
So reading the person,
but just creating an environment where the feedback and the accountability is at a level that it's accepted because the outcome and the common goal is just so common, so often spoken about in a way that there's only one way to get there. So I think back through those periods, and like the coaching sprays has been a big topic of late with David Noble and North Melbourne, and having to apologise to a playing group, and I mean that's incomprehensible to me that a coach would have to apologise to a playing group. But I know times have changed, and even late towards the end of my career as a captain, it became much more of a teaching environment rather than a hardcore high accountability environment. Which one's not right, one's not wrong, but the way that I responded and I saw our group respond was the high accountability environment. And Ross just nailed it. He just absolutely nailed it. And there were players that fell by the wayside, don't worry, and who couldn't deal with it and who didn't like it. But you're sort of in that environment, you exit your way in, or you exit your way out of the system pretty quickly.
Yep.
And so for for Rossi's boys, Rossi's disciples, of which there are a lot of us, he provided the environment for us to thrive, with no guarantees. And that's one thing he always said, boys, we're going to do this, and we're going to give ourselves every opportunity, but there are no guarantees. But you have to choose to take the emotional risk to be great and put yourself out there with no guarantee of it delivering success. And at the time, you're probably thinking, well, if we do all this, we're going to win one. And we went really close, but Geelong were probably saying the exact same thing down the road, and Collingwood were saying the exact same thing. And, two teams go to war, and they were incredible grand finals.
Oh, my
and
gosh.
we went as close as any group in the history of the game to winning it without winning it, a goal and a draw. But all you can do is give yourself the best chance, and we did that.
Yeah, you did. Have you agonised over moments after it all?
Nah, not at all. Never.
I mean, there are moments within those games. There's the bounce of the ball with Stephen Milne in 2010. There's the toe poke with Matthew Scarlett in 2009. But having been out there and lived these experiences, is there any imagery that sticks out in your head, little moments within games where you think, gee, if that just happened differently?
Oh, yeah, I mean, just little things. Like there was a moment late in 2009 where I was on the mark. I think Corey Enright or maybe Darren Milburn was kicking out from fullback, and I jumped to smother it from the kick out from fullback. How often do you see that kick smothered? Never. And I reckon I got within a centimetre of smothering it. And I just think, gosh, if I had have timed my jump a little bit. So sometimes it's become less and less.
Yep.
I remember the moment where BJ rose up and took that mark and then went back and kicked the goal. And I thought, well, this is going to happen. We're going to win this. And just, as quickly as I thought that it was a draw, so yeah, just little moments, but it's become, I wouldn't say easier and easier to bear, but probably you reflect on it differently. And the shared experience, I guess, is what really counts. I would love to have obviously won one and shared it with the supporters and family and the boys and the coaches and everyone involved. But you can put your head on the pillow pretty comfortably at night, knowing that there wasn't anything from an effort point of view that you could really do differently, and a preparation point of view. So it is what it is.
I mean, there were great sides that you were playing against as well at the time, as you say. 2009, you had been the dominant side. Yep. You dropped 2 home and away games by a collective 7
I think Geelong only dropped
points
3 or 4. They were a pretty amazing side as well.
What about the draw? The emotions after a drawn grand final, and then just expanding on that a bit further, the idea of returning again, that's no longer part of the game. But how do you feel about all of that? At the time, you think, I want this now, I want to play this out today?
Yeah. I mean, as soon as the siren went, we all knew. It wasn't like we were going to, convince the AFL, let's just change the rules on the fly. So we all knew what was going to unfold. And yeah, the next week was really strange. It was not a grand final week because there was no parade, there was no fanfare. I can't even remember whether we had open training session or whether it was. I actually, it's all sort of blends into the one experience in a way, which is a little bit strange. But there are some moments from the replay that I get confused with. Was that in the replay or was that in the draw? I can't remember. So, clearly, there were things that happened after the game that we did and things that happened that Collingwood did, and people want to draw conclusions. Well, they went to the post-match function, so that's why they won the next week.
It's half-time was Mick Moldhouse's famous line. Yeah.
It's all of that sort of stuff. But you say we were the dominant team of 2009. They were the dominant team of 2010, and it didn't go our way, mate. But it's one of those things that you look back on, and it's probably 2 weeks of the year where it's in your face, build up to grand final week, and then it disappears and it goes away for another year. But every year it rolls around, you have the same thoughts and you wish things were differently.
It still hits you pretty firmly.
Grand final week. Yeah. That's all right.
Oh, mate. I mean, when you reflect on it, even as a football follower, you feel like I can't really think of a team that deserved to win a premiership more, given the quality of the side, your achievements during the year, the way you acquitted yourself on the biggest stage in those big games as well. It just doesn't feel right that you didn't.
But they're hard to win.
Yeah.
They're hard to win. That's why, teams have droughts like Melbourne did and like St Kilda do. So I hope our current group can right the wrongs of the past soon, mate.
Even talking about it, I can just see this element of passion within you. There's obviously the passion for St Kilda.
Yeah.
And then there's the passion for Tasmania that you have so clearly as well. This is a really, really hard question. I don't ask many of these on the Believers Read, but I'd love to know. What would mean more to you? St Kilda winning another premiership or Tasmania playing a match in the AFL? What do you think would stir your emotions more?
It's a hard one to answer. And I've got to be mindful of the fact that I'm on the Tassie podcast. Look, I think the Tassie thing's going to happen. So as I sit here, right now, I'm so confident on Tassie having their own team that my level of confidence of that happening in the immediate future outweighs my confidence of the Saints winning a flag. So right now, if the Saints got up and won the flag, in the next few years, and my kids are invested. Like I watch the game through the eyes of my children now as well. And if the Saints don't win, it's hard work at home. Like my 7-year-old James, he cries when they don't win. So the fans that I've come to know over 20 odd years of association with the St Kilda Football Club, the fact that it's 66, the fact that we went so close and couldn't salute, it's probably that right now, but only because I'm so confident on Tassie having a team.
I love your confidence. That's fantastic. Do you reckon your kids, I've got 2 boys and maybe through force or just constantly having these themes around them, they feel a very strong connection to Tassie.
Yep.
Rode the Jack Jumpers performance. That was their team. It was
awesome.
Quite special to watch. They love the Tassie Tigers. They go for the Hobart Hurricanes. Do your kids feel an affinity to Tassie as well?
They do. They absolutely love Orford. They're probably a little bit young to really get it. I mean, our kids are incredibly worldly. They've got a mother that's from Texas, so they do feel a really strong connection to the United States and to Texas. And then we live in Melbourne. We spend a lot of time in Tassie on the East Coast, so they're sort of pulled in a lot of different directions. But as they get older and have more experiences in Tassie, they'll definitely build an affinity for it. I mean, they know that that's where I'm from. That they already have sort of their own favourite things to do when we're on the East Coast. They've got a group of friends down there over summer that it's almost like a summer. It's almost like a summer romance for the kids when they go down and they hook up with the same kids from the year before, and everyone's a year older. And I'm just waiting for the time when we go there and all of a sudden James is in his teens.
Oh, look out!
And there are a couple of the teenage girls and all, all that sort of dynamic will change, I'm sure. But they do. I mean, they've got Saints jumpers, but they'll have a map when we get our team as
Fantastic.
Well. They'll have a Tassie jumper as well.
I kind of like the idea of one of your children marrying a fine young lady down in Tasmania, Nick, at some point. That'd be very nice. Why does this? I can see your passion and I can see how connected you are to the island. This push for a Tasmanian team, I honestly felt like the narrative changed a lot. I think it was on ESPN. I read an article that you'd written a few years ago talking openly about your passion to see this happen, and it was perhaps the first time I'd ever heard you speak about it in such a way. And gosh, it was powerful to have you as part of this pitch. I was so thrilled that you did it. Why did you do it, and why have you continued to be such a strong supporter of the campaign?
I think because I was a little bit naive of the state of the game in Tassie. And when I think back to what we were talking about before and growing up as a young boy in Tassie and the TFL and the old boys and my experiences in football from talking to friends that are on the ground down there and living it, it's just footy's not the same anymore down there. and reading about what had happened to leagues around the state and the folding of clubs. And in my mind, there was a level of neglect that had been shown to Tasmania from a footballing point of view. You know, even the amount of kids getting drafted out of Tassie, it was just, you know, someone would get drafted from Tassie and it would pique the interest more than it should, because, you know, back when I was getting drafted, there were 5 or 6 kids every year, and that just hasn't been the case. So it was a combination of all of those things, and just the desire to provide the opportunity for the people of Tasmania, you know, who are football people. It is a football state. The same opportunity that non-traditional states have been given, and so becoming a part of. Initially, there was a sort of a working committee that got together were convened to talk about the pathways and the state league and all of these sort of things. And it was in the work within that I realised, and I wasn't the catalyst for it or the driver of it necessarily, but when the task force was established off the back of that, and this real push for a team started to gain momentum, it was just something that I felt compelled to be a part of, and I thought I could provide real value from a real life, you know, lived experience on high performance, on retention, and coming at it from a Tasmanian's point of view. I thought that was really important. But a lot of the conversations that I'd had with people in the past, the ignorance annoyed me. And so I was really keen to be a part of, you know, the North-South divide, and, there's not enough, you know, there just wouldn't be enough support. There's not enough industry down there to support a team. And like all of these myths that we just would go through and debunk one by one. And I was just really keen to be a part of that. And then, you know, when you consider the calibre of the people involved, I just thought, if this is it, I want to be a part of it. Yeah. And I want to bring about some change, and it's been an incredible journey so far. And I know the campaign's, you know, just sort of gone live and just been launched. And I said I was confident before, but now is not the time for complacency. We've got to hammer this home. And you know, just thinking forward, sort of 4 or 5 years, just the vision of a stadium, you know, on the Derwent, full house, running out in this, having a win, spilling out into the city, like it would just be amazing. And I think what it would do for the game down there, and, you know, we've seen it with the Jack Jumpers, the way people have embraced it, to have sort of Tassie then cement itself as a sporting high performance environment. Jack Jumpers, Hurricanes, Tassie, you know, whatevers. I want to see it happen. It has to happen.
Yeah, it feels right too, because I think from an output perspective, and football, as you say, quite rightly, has not produced as many players of late, but Tasmania has typically been such a great breeding ground, given its population size, for wonderful athletes, cyclists, Ariane Titmus, all these wonderful athletes, cricketers, the Australian captain. You know, it's a powerful place for producing sporting talent, and that idea of a high-performance centre where we have multiple national teams, I think that's got a lot of merit. Just wanted to touch a little bit on your family. So your brother and your sister, you're very close with them?
Yeah. Like my brother and I, like, obviously losing a sibling, you know, brings you even tighter. So my brother and I are incredibly close. You know, again, probably over the past, you know, 20 years or whatever, you know, I was playing footy and they were in Queensland, or they were doing, you know, my brother was overseas or whatever, and the East Coast became sort of the hub for all of our greatest family memories over the past 20 years. And when you lose a family member, you reflect on those even more and even more fondly. We, you know, tight family. it's getting more and more difficult for all of us to be able to get together in Tassie because we've got a 3-bedroom house, and between me and my brother we've got 5 boys. So the bloodlines are strong.
Yes,
and we're tight, obviously.
Yeah. What was Maddie like? Can you tell me about Maddie? She seemed like she had this beautiful personality.
She was a beautiful girl. She was incredibly strong, incredibly resilient to endure what she went through. The most fiercely loyal person I've ever come across. If you were a keyboard warrior and you had a pot shot at me at any stage over the journey, you could guarantee that she was going to find it and she was going to fire back. She had no filter on that sort of stuff, which actually got us into trouble a couple of times. An amazing girl. Obviously, it's really hard to go through sort of what she went through and what we went through in losing her. But she's provided the catalyst for obviously a lot of change in the medical research landscape, and that was her wish, and Maddie's vision was born on the back of that, and I'm really proud of it.
That must have been an extremely difficult time for you when you're balancing. You talked about your performance anxiety as a player and how wound up you were, but then you have your sister's health in the background and your love for her and care for her and seeing what she was going through. I cannot imagine what that would have been like. Yeah,
it was pretty tough time as a family. I mean, she was diagnosed a week before the finals in 2010. So that was a bit of a shock to all of us. And then through her illness, 2004, far out, the dates are all 2014. She was in ICU for a lot of that year, and then 2015 early. It was only a few weeks before the season started when she passed away, and we all went down to Tassie. I was down there for a couple of weeks, and in the back of my mind, I knew that I was still a captain of the Saints and had to get back. I think in 2 weeks leading into the season, I'd been for one run along, which we'd been for a walk, and we'd walked to the end of Rebben Beach, and I was like, well, I should probably go for a run or something. So I turned around and ran back. It was maybe a kilometre. That's about it. And that was sort of about the extent of the preparation I did down there. But yeah, it was a pretty strange time, like grieving and then trying to lead a team and almost putting on a bit of a facade at times because you were dealing with your own things and trying to lead an AFL team. Yeah, it was challenging.
Grief is massive, isn't it?
Yeah,
and the effect it has on you, and it can put you in a space where it doesn't feel real almost. What's going on around you? Is that how you found it? Yeah,
I did. And but everyone grieves differently, and that, I guess, at the time, being a part of a football club was a great bonus because it's a big family. Everyone wrapped their arms around me, supported my family. So the distraction and support of football was a huge bonus throughout that period.
Yeah. And the legacy, mate, and the work that you do with the foundation.
And I mean, football was a platform for all of that initially. So that doesn't happen, and we don't have that opportunity without the profile and without the platform. So incredibly grateful for that as well. And so much good's been done, which is in terms of Maddie's legacy, it's as big as you can get. Actually, sort of altering and saving and changing people's lives. It's pretty special.
Yeah, that's awesome. How much do you talk to your dad these days now that you're not playing? Do you still ring him regularly?
Yeah.
Conversations change, the tenor of them or the...
Yeah. It's usually can you come and babysit? No, we talk about footy. It's just a bit of I feel like the edges come off me. So the edges come off everything in my life, conversations, friendships, relationships, everything's just a bit more relaxed and chilled out these days, which is great. So I love life on the other side. Football was great for me. It allowed me to channel all of my energies into something that I loved and was good at. But life on the other side's pretty good too.
Yeah. And chefing.
Yeah.
How on earth did you find time to be a good cook with all that was going on?
Yeah. I mean, my parents are both incredible cooks, so I learned a lot from them. And The whole MasterChef experience was it was like a microcosm of footy for me. You just dial in, do the work, and hope for the best, without any guarantee.
I will work the hardest. I will be the greatest
That's
MasterChef
right.
contestant ever.
The kitchen's a bloody dangerous place too. It's almost more dangerous than the footy field. I think I cut myself and burnt myself in every episode. It was unbelievable. But loved it. Amazing experience. And, my love of Tassie produce and that whole experience, it was, it was a great opportunity, particularly in the first couple of episodes, to show off all of that because – I think the first episode I cooked crayfish. The second episode I cooked a scallop pie, which Tassie's well known for.
Yeah.
So I was out there representing not just from a football front, from a cooking and produce front as well.
Have expectations gone up? So when the family come round for dinner or friends or
Absolutely.
whatever, they're expecting
I've got
Michelin
mates.
star?
I've got mates that think I'm an absolute fraud because I've known them for 20 years and never cooked for them once. So I've got a long dinner invitation list I've got to get through.
All right, now you're a father of three.
Three boys, yeah.
If we've got a few listeners, I'm sure, out there who are have young children as well, what's an easy go-to that will satisfy young kids, in your opinion?
Well, if you want to get them involved in the actual cooking process, like we do spaghetti meatballs on Sundays, and so the boys help me make the sauce and then roll the meatballs as well. So that's a pretty easy one.
That's a good solid one.
All dads can master that one.
Mate, I could talk to you for hours on end. Unfortunately, we haven't. You've got things to do, but I've got a list of 10 quick questions for you before we depart, and they all relate to Tasmania.
Shoot.
First of them, who is the greatest footballer Tasmania has produced? I think I'm in the room with someone who could lay claims to be among that group.
There's a lot of good forwards, isn't there? Like Hutto, Royce, Richo, Jack.
Yourself.
It's a pretty loaded forward line. Am I missing anyone there?
Michael Roach.
Oh, Michael Roach. Far out. I might be on the pine. I didn't see Royce Hart play. I didn't see Peter Hudson play. I didn't see Ian Stewart play. So you might have to help me.
Lynchy, we didn't even mention
Lynchy. Far out.
He's in the forward line as well.
Out. It's stacked.
What?
Even the reserves team would be good in the
This
forward
team
line.
would kick 200 points a week.
Phenomenal. I didn't give you an answer there.
No.
Royce Hart.
Okay, Royce Hart. What should the name of the Tasmanian team be? Have you got a view?
We can't be the Tigers.
Yeah.
Can't be the Jack Jumpers, which I love that
That's
name.
a great
It's
name.
a great name. People like Jack Jumpers. What's a Jack Jumper?
I'll show you a
Yeah,
Jack
I'll
Jumper.
come here, I'll put one on your skin and let it bite you. Then you tell me what a Jack Jumper is. Have to be the Devils, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think the Devils is certainly a great one. What should the colours be?
Don't mess with it. Just the original. It's got to be the map.
Never in doubt. Who should be the club's inaugural coach?
Well, we're what are we, sort of 4 or 5 years away? I reckon he's on the task force at the moment. It's not me.
Yeah, okay.
Clarko. Let him go and do a stint somewhere and then we'll drag him down.
The farm needs some work, 3 or 4 years worth
perfect.
of work and then
Perfect.
get
We'll
back
get him
into
down.
coaching. Who should be the inaugural president?
George Bailey.
Oh, how good would he be?
He'd be great.
He was a real rascal back in the day,
Yeah,
George.
but he's got a great business mind. He's done an MBA.
Yep.
He's had good sort of experience in cricket.
Excellent people person.
Yeah.
Great
What do you reckon?
communicator. I would
Bales.
love to see Bales do
Wouldn't
it.
he be good?
He'd be brilliant.
Good Tassie boy, Bales.
That, I have to say, this is the 10th episode of
Yep.
The Believers that I've recorded, Nick, and that's probably the best suggestion I've heard for president. Should Tasmania have a song that is something new or in the mould of the traditional football songs?
I like the traditional football songs, but I think we could come up with something. Better than the Giants did a good job with theirs.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah,
it's
that's
Cat
not-
Empire, I think, isn't
Is it?
it? Yeah.
No, we'll come up with something good.
Okay, and who should we play in our first AFL game? Who would be the right opponent for Tasmania in Game 1 at a packed waterfront stadium under the roof?
Well, it'd be great to get one of the big marquee clubs. I mean, Hawthorn having invested so much in Tasmania or North Melbourne, I think Hawthorn against Tasmania would be a really good start. And then there's a club like St Kilda have so many. I think 6 or 7 of the 1966 Premiership team were Tasmanian.
Yep.
So there are great links there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Collingwood would be good too, wouldn't it? Be good.
We'll sell it out no matter who
that's
plays.
right. Exactly.
If Tasmania was to get free rein on one current player, who would you go for? let's pretend that the team's coming in a season or two. So you've got pick of the crop at the moment.
Sam Walsh. Yeah. I think from what I've been told about him, from a culture, professional, it's not just about what you see on the field.
Yeah.
I think he would be a great person to bring in from a culture, work rate, professionalism point of view.
And a damn good player.
Yeah, and a really good player.
All right, and I think I know the answer to this. Where would you recommend a tourist visit in Tasmania?
Just head up the East Coast. Just do the East Coast Drive. Can't go wrong.
It is magic.
Grab yourself a scallop pie along the way somewhere.
Oh, a Woodies at
A
the
Woody
end of the
stay
day.
at the Spring Bay Hotel. Perfect.
All right, the siren sounded.
Yeah.
You're 5 points down. Which Tasmanian player, current or former?
Jack. Dead-eye.
Yeah,
Much as I had to say it, dead-eye.
How much do you reckon he'd relish that opportunity as well?
He loves it. He loves it. He's had so many shots after the siren this year.
In quarters, yeah.
Yeah. Unbelievable. He had 3 in one game.
Yeah, that was against the Western Bulldogs.
Yeah.
One of them he kicked the barrel, didn't he?
He had 3 in one game. I was cheering against him that game because he was about to go past me on the goal kicking tally.
Yes.
He had the shot after the siren, actually, after the game to go ahead. And we were all sitting there watching it. And they actually filmed me. And then when he missed it, I've given it a big fist bump. Which probably shouldn't do.
Did he? Was there any correspondence in the aftermath of him going past you?
Yeah. No, there was even a trophy made up and presented on Fox Footy and all sorts of carry on from Jack. Ridiculous.
Nick Riewoldt.
Yes.
Are you a believer?
Oh, locked in, ready to go. Memberships, boys will be kitted out in the jumpers. I'm ready to go. I'm a believer.
Absolute delight speaking with you. Thanks for your time.
Cheers, mate.